Product Partnership, expat experts for people living and working abroad, relocating overseas, and investing offshore. Whether that's in property or business, whether you're working remotely for an employer in another country, or working as a contractor for your own country, your own company in another location. Product or expat experts for people living and working abroad with a UK connection, whether that be in Europe or around the world. You can always contact us for more information and advice on our website at productpartnership.com. Contact us. In today's Living and Working Abroad show, we've got a range of topics to cover, as we usually do. And what we're looking to cover today are the whys and wherefores around the world affecting expats that are living and working abroad, overseas and close to home. So let's dive right into that. Ever so China. So when you've got China, you have to be fragile. When you've got China, China can be fragile and it can break. So you have to take care with it and look after it. And when it becomes the economic dominant force around the world, then it's an interesting situation. It can affect the whole world economy, as well as providing for jobs for people relocating overseas, working abroad. But there's a bit of a China crisis going on at the moment. They're lagging differently behind the rest of the world because they maintained their COVID crackdown for much longer than the rest of the world. So they're very much in a recession this year. And we've seen that the Chinese property companies, specifically Evergrande, but also Country Garden, have had lots of international money worries recently and are staving off bankruptcy. Now, if you're part of the biggest economy, which is a communist economy, that's inevitably going to lead to nationalization. So in a hybrid economy like China now, Evergrande, one of the biggest companies in the world, with over $300 billion of debt, have now found themselves and parts of their business being nationalized by the Chinese government and taken into state ownership. People will be arrested. Subsidiaries of Evergrande this last week have been taken into custody, and their wealth management part of their core financing has been taken over. As we've said in recent times, that China is full of ghost cities of apartments and buildings built but not sold. And this is a bit of an issue potentially around the world in other locations. And those ramifications from the recession in China, post-COVID, and with their property boom, could have a positive effect around the world, reducing inflation elsewhere. But it also has a knock-on consequence economically, just as the world adjusts to less capacity or other issues coming from China. So it is an impact. It's an impact for businesses and for expats, wherever there might be Chinese investment or tourists or where you've got a business relationship with them. So something to bear in mind. It's something that can affect the economy going forward. So treat it up. I can't believe I didn't have no do not disturb on there. Anyway, carrying on with our Living and Working Abroad show online on YouTube. You can follow us each week where we discuss relevant expat topics for people living and working abroad. You can also follow it on Twitter Space, where it's just a voice, but as long as we can have the microphone tapped up, then we can record the YouTube onto there. And if you've got any questions on the Twitter Space or on the YouTube, ask those questions and we'll give you the answer straight away. Let's move on to our next topic. And the next topic we want to look at today is trust somebody. When you're living and working abroad and cross-border, you have to make decisions and you have to find new partners to do business with. But it's not just a case for expats. There's a case for anybody in this world. Whatever you're going to do, you're going to take some opinion or some advice from somebody, and that needs to be somebody that's trusted to you. That could come by referral, by recommendation, or it can come from the internet or from influencers. We see lots of influencers on the internet now and on social media trying to recommend and suggest a particular product, service, and advisor. And that's all well and good, but that is just one way of doing it. And it's just a different version. It's a 2020s version. That influencer, that financial influencer that then we would have had in the past. And it can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. These things are different. If you have a printer in your business, the printer creates a paper copy, but you don't necessarily need that anymore. You could use a PDF copy. And in the old days, the copies will be produced by monks in monastery that would handwrite out books again and again. You've got to verify whether you trust that copy and that process of doing that duplication. So trust is a funny thing, and it's something that we need to get. A Proact, we offer a service. We are a niche consulting advice business for expats in business for the families to protect that. You have to make the decisions at some point. You have to trust somebody. And how we prefer to do it is by recommendation and word of mouth from people that we do business with. We're not perfect. We can't help everybody all the time. But if we can build our network through Proact ambassadors and through word of mouth, they can be rest assured that Proact and its partners can look after you, your family, your business, and living and working abroad. If you're interested in becoming an ambassador as an introducer, an agent, or a professional a correspondent in another country working with Proact and Proact clients, you can contact us about our ambassador program and find out more about that online at our website at proactpartnership.com. Thanks very much. The next topic I want to discuss today on Living and Working Abroad channel is an economic migrant crisis. So the next topic to discuss today is the EU and the EU crisis and migrant crisis that they're going through. Asylum seekers have caused masses of problems relocating overseas for many years now, and it's become an increasingly political hot topic. And the international legislation for asylum seeking, for people fleeing war, conflict, or oppression, is designed to give people safe passage when they leave those war zones. And bombs falling in Syria can be a very good reason for that. But it's become a business now where it is being, and that's partly because the world international agencies have improved medical health around the world. The mortality rate around the world for children is reduced, and we've seen a boom in the worldwide population that more than doubled. There's over 7 billion people in the world, and half of those are under 25. The migrants are people looking for work and for a better lifestyle than before. And they're prepared to make claims to do that, while they by taking risks to move around the world. So we've seen that the UK Labour Party are in negotiations with the EU to create a new type of associate membership of the EU, to include arrangements such as migration from the EU. Part of the UK's problem already is that they have asylum seekers coming from, yes, Asia and Africa into the UK, but they're coming from France, they're coming from Europe. Now, under international asylum law, that is a safe haven. They should be seeking asylum in the EU, but the French managed to choose to not manage their borders and allow those boat passengers, those asylum seekers in Europe, to get on the boats to the UK, and that is a conflict there. And the UK Labour Party are trying to do a deal to accommodate some of those asylum seekers. It's always it's a big conflict with the European Court of Human Rights and the EU. Italy's got a similar problem with 126,000 migrants arriving from North Africa across the Mediterranean to asylum seek. And Italy now is passing new asylum laws, which is alienating it from some of its northern EU members that don't want to take in quite so many migrants and deal with the issue of accommodating those asylum seekers under international laws, where if they are genuinely found, that their case has to be considered and processed by the receiving state, and they have to be provided the ability to work or financial compensation while they're there. And that, if a country is not acting in good faith, is a good reason to move people on or out of your world. Is that what's happening in France? Is that what's happening in France with the Channel crossing asylum seeking crisis? Who knows? But it's happening in the EU with people coming into Italy. How many of those Italian migrants are getting into northern France and then into the UK? So it's a real issue for Europe to deal with. Countries like Cyprus have taken on a lot of asylum seekers. It's a big cultural change for them. And in the last month, we saw riot shields and mass arrests of 600 asylum seekers because of the issues that have been created in local communities in Cyprus for asylum seekers. So it creates issues because of the numbers, but it's a world problem and it needs addressing in the world. And so does asylum seeker laws need changing? Yes or no. No, if it's genuine conflict, but yes, if it's criminal activity that is illegally allowing people to cross border. To cross border and work, you could get a work visa and you can relocate in that way. And that is the purpose of the EU Schengen zone, to protect its borders and the integrity of the people within there. That's what they need to enforce. And so when they're talking about with the UK, they're now talking about offering the UK associate membership back into the EU. But the associate membership is also looking to absorb countries like Ukraine, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, those Eastern Balkan states, into the EU. Kosovo would be another one. Is that practical for the EU? Is it something that would create peace and stability? Possibly. Is it something that would create a solution to the problem? Who knows? Having said that, Armenia and Azerbaijan have been at a proxy war for many years now, and that's potentially breaking into open conflict in the next month or so. Um, and this is what the EU are planning with associate membership and to involve the UK. But is that the answer to the UK's problem? But at the same time, the EU's inner circle are creating, are planning to create a new inner circle. When the EU was set up in 1957 with 6 people, 6 countries, um, it was a small cooperation between those 6 countries. Now it's expanded to be a much bigger business with all the economies around the world. And with the planned expansion and the associate membership, they want to create an inner council of deciding votes, in effect, countries that are the same as all other equal members of the European Union, but there will be more equal than the other member states, the new member states, the associate member states. So it's something akin to Animal Farm, where you can have a revolution and you can have a dramatic change so that everybody can be treated fairly and equally under the law. But then the whole system creates and the privileged class, a new privileged class, emerges that controls the few. An inner circle in Europe, an inner circle in China. Um, these things develop and these things change, and let's see what it is. But in the meanwhile, working, living and working abroad, if you want to relocate within the EU, there's a visa system that allows you to work and to get that work permit. And if you can meet the requirements, then you can do that safely and happily. So if you've got a working requirement or property purchase in the EU and you want more help and guidance, contact us at productpartnership.com. There's a quick point I want to make on money for nothing or how to create a Rust Belt. So the UK are rushing towards net zero as if it's a thing that needs to be done. We may be going into global warming, but for those of you that are old enough, you can remember the 70s, which were very hot. I can remember bad winters as well in the past as well, with lots of snow in the UK. So the 70s were typified by very hot summers, but also dreadful economic conditions as well. And so global warming is not something new. The world heats up and it cools down. And decarbonisation is a big topical thing. And we've got governments throwing lots of money at it. The British government are throwing 500 million into decarb steel. Now, British Steel is a proper expat business owned by Tata Steel, which is the Indian-based company. And the British government are putting in 500 million into a scheme with Tata Steel putting in 700 million to create a change from their steel plants in the UK from being coal powered into being electric furnaces, and therefore reducing the carbon footprint of steel production in the UK. Which is all very convenient if that is necessary. But instead of using coal from Britain and an energy source from Britain, we use electricity. Now, the electricity can come from anywhere, but it's still got to come from somewhere. So if you're replacing coal, you've got to build new energy plants. And so is somebody going to get a wind farm subsidy or a nuclear power station subsidy? Or are we going to import the electric from another country? It's an interesting scenario about what it is. But the worst thing about that, to change from an existing energy source in coal from the UK, is then going to make 3,000 out of 8,000 British steel workers redundant. So is it about decarbonisation or is it about making people redundant. So South Wales is a big steel making area. So already lost many businesses around cars and steel production, and is it about to become the Rust Belt of the UK as the UK government subsidise a rush to electric clean energy, which is a new source of energy. With got a new nuclear plant or a new wind farm, a new way of somebody making money that is anybody but the workers. The 3,000 workers are losing their job. So is um, a decarbonisation and the rush to a carbon neutral worth it, or is it creating a rust belt? You decide. Um, for more information and guidance on um, anything to do with your overseas business and cross-border tax arrangements, contact us at proactpartnership.com. Many people comment at the moment about how the UK economy is in a dreadful state at the moment. But again, for those with a memory, you'll see that the 70s could be repeating themselves. In the 70s, we had an oil crisis created by the main oil producers in the world, raising oil prices. It led to things like a 3-day working week. People had to stay at home, they couldn't work. It was exacerbated by strikes, by hot weather, and led to inflation going up to like 15% interest rates and 20% inflation. And it created this period of intense recession and stagnation within the economy that stuck with the British economy for a whole decade. Now, what's the difference between that in the 70s and the 2020s that we're experiencing now? Um, the COVID crisis started the problem. That stopped people working, that stopped people producing. That led to money being pumped into the system, to inflation escalating. The Saudis have now increased oil price again because they can, because the world's major oil producers, Saudi and Russia, want their money for their own projects. Saudi to modernize their economy for the post-oil, post-carbon economy, and Russia to protect their only source of revenue, given that they can't trade with the world, is what they can get from the oil with the partners that they've got. So a rising oil price this year is potentially going to lead to more inflation or more recession or more economic struggles and difficulties. We've got striking going on in the UK, on and on. There's different people with different interests. They fall behind on pay, so they strike to get the more pay. But actually, post Brexit, the fact that there isn't a free movement of cheap labour into the UK from around the EU should actually help the UK economy invest in capital and move forward from that position to become a stronger economy, a more productive economy, a high wage economy. So the troubles of the UK in the 2020s are nothing to do with Brexit. Brexit was a change, but the stagnation that was in salaries and wages in the UK was to do with a low inflation and a money spend from economic policies of the past. The problems that we've got in 2023 are not dissimilar to the 70s. It needs better government. It needs better financial management and leadership from the Bank of England. It needs investment in new businesses and investment in technology and companies to move forward and not to keep subsidizing and increasing taxes, which deflate the incentive to invest and grow an economy. Overseas businesses will invest in Europe, in the UK, and work cross-border in a free economy without the constraints of high taxes and cheap money. A balanced economy where capital is something of value will lead to the investment in business and jobs that people need going forward. Brexit is not the fault of the UK's current economic woes. Everything else needs to change. For more information and guidance on living and working abroad, across border, investing in overseas property, making a will to protect your assets, or putting your assets in trust to protect them against if something goes wrong, contact us at proactpartnership.com. So thanks a lot for listening today. We discussed a number of issues. We discussed the China crisis and the financial woes where the government are seizing power and bringing control under their own remit of the debt that's been created by property companies using subsidies and cheap money to build properties that nobody wants to live in. We said that we need to trust somebody when we're doing that. And the way we should do that is by referral, recommendation, by working with trusted partners. If you're looking for an opportunity to work with a trusted partner, contact us at proactpartnership.com. We're looking at the EU migrant crisis and saying, whether it's Italy or whether it's France and the UK, the economic crisis, the migrant crisis comes from asylum seekers, where the legislation is being used inappropriately for economic migrants and not for people that are fleeing conflict and terror. Economic migrants should have the qualifications and the capital to create new business abroad and invest or as an employee or a contractor in a new business in their new country. That requires residency visas, tax registrations, and home abroad, all the things that Proact is an expert at. When you give power to a few people, when you liberate, give power to everybody, there's always a few that come to seize that extra power. The EU now looking to create an inner circle is another example of Animal Farm. The UK government subsidising redundancies to chase after carbon neutral and subsidising overseas investment could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. We need to make sure that capital is invested, financial policy, government policy is correct to allow the people in the EU, the UK, and around the world to develop and grow their business. What we're seeing in the economies of the 2023s and the 2020s is as a result of lockdowns, restrictive working practices, and poor money management by governments around the world. Not any different from the 70s when we had very hot summers as well. So let's look forward to moving forward with sound financial policies, good government, and good practice, so that we can all live and work abroad in our overseas property and business and prosper down the generations. For more information and guidance, contact us at proactpartnership.com.